The most talked about thing today is the sentencing for the cop Chauvin. Um, the former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was sentenced Friday to 22 and a half years in prison for the murder of George Floyd that happened last year. Chauvin, who's 45, is expected to serve at least 15 years behind bars out of the 23. What the sentence is not based on is emotion or sympathy at the time, but at the same time, I want to acknowledge and the deep and tremendous pain that all the families are feeling, especially the Floyd family who suffered the most from this. The Hennepin County Judge Peter Cahill said in a court statement. In his memorandum opinion, Cahill said two of the four aggravating factors were at play in the sentence: that Chauvin abused the trust and authority, and he acted with particular cruelty towards Floyd. His gratuitous infliction of pain and psychological cruelty while he was imbued with the authority of the state justified the sentence, Cahill wrote. Chauvin will be required to register as a predatory offender, and he has to provide a DNA sample according to Cahill's memo. A jury convicted Chauvin back in April of second-degree murder and third-degree murder and fourth-degree manslaughter, and the death of Floyd, who was 46 at the time. He could have received up to 30 years in prison, if not more. But the Floyd family members, attorneys, and activists said that they were not satisfied with the sentence, but hoped an ongoing federal indictment would put Chauvin away. And many called on lawmakers to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. 22 and a half is not enough. George Floyd's nephew Brandon Williams said at a press conference after the hearing, surrounded by lawyers and family members of several black people were shot by police. And what kind of message are we sending to our country? And many said the sentence was not justice. It is not justice because George Floyd is in a grave. Even though Chauvin will be in jail, the Reverend Al Sharpton said, but justice would have been George Floyd never having been killed. Justice would have been the maximum sentence that we can give somebody. We got more than what we thought only because we've been disappointed before. In a separate press conference, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison called the sentencing an important moment for our country. The outcome of this case is critically important, but by itself it's not enough, he said. My hope for our country is that at this moment it gives us pause and allows us to rededicate ourselves to the real societal change that will move us much further along the road to justice. At the sentence hearing, Chauvin offered his condolences to Floyd's family, but he did not apologize for his actions. He said he was unable to speak further due to ongoing litigation. Chauvin's mother, Carolyn Palantry, spoke at the hearing, the first family member to testify on Chauvin's behalf. She told the court that the media the media public and the prosecution team that they had wrongly depicted her son as aggressive, heartless, and uncaring, and a racist. Actually, what he showed was exactly all those things. I want this court to know that none of these things are true, and that my son is a good man. Yeah, he didn't really show that. She basically goes on to say that Derek is a quiet, thoughtful, honorable, and selfless man. Yeah, bullshit. Yeah, that's a really pretty way to lie about your son. Palantry had said Chauvin has played the events of the day over and over in his head. I've seen this toll has taken on bullshit. She claims, oh, because you're sentencing my son, you're sentencing me. Yeah, whatever. On that part. Several of Floyd's family members also offered to comment at the hearing, and they called on the court to give Chauvin the maximum sentence that you can give somebody in prison, which is basically life, without parole. Floyd's 7-year-old daughter, Gianna, testified remotely via cell phone camera video. Wearing a checkered shirt and purple headband, she told the court that she asked how did my dad get hurt, and she wishes she could play with him and have him help her brush her hair like he used to. Gianna told the court that she knows her dad is still around through her in spirit. Yeah. If she could say anything to him, she said she would tell him that I miss him and that we love him. Floyd's brother, Philonzi Floyd, spoke to the court, wiping away tears. Basically, he said his brother's death changed his life and that he hasn't had a good night's sleep since. Basically, he says my family and I have been given a life sentence. We will not be able to get George back, he said. Terrence Floyd, another brother, said he would ask Chauvin, who sat several feet from him, why? What were you thinking? What was going through your head when you had your knee on my brother's neck? He paused at times with emotion and looked down. We don't want to see no more slaps on the wrist. He told the judge. If it was us, if the roles were reversed, there would be no case. It'd be open and shut. We'd be in jail for murdering somebody. So we asked for that same penalty for Derek Chauvin. In George Floyd Square on Friday afternoon, the crowd watched Cahill announce Chauvin's sentence on the smartphone of Jennifer Starr Dodd, the intersection of 38 and Chicago where Floyd was killed, and was open to traffic by the city earlier this month, but activists are still occupying the space with artwork and barricades. Although many were hoping for a longer sentence, many, like Starr Dodd, felt 22 and a half years was still reason to celebrate. The historic sentence brings the Floyd family and our nation one step closer to healing by delivering closure and accountability. But a joint statement from attorneys Ben Crump, Antonio Ramanucci, and Chris Stewart said, for once, a police officer who wrongly took the life of a black woman was held to account. Tashira Garraway, an organizer for families supporting families against police violence, said that she and other local organizers would continue to call for justice for other victims of police violence in Minnesota. But our families are just going through so much right now, sitting here watching these people slightly give George Floyd justice, and knowing that's something we're hoping and praying for. We will continue on because we don't have a choice. But Courtney Ross, George Floyd's former girlfriend, spoke at the press conference to ask Minneapolis residents to protest peacefully Friday night and to continue to push for a change. I pray, Minneapolis, that we have a nonviolent evening. But earlier Friday, Cahill denied a defense attorney's request for a new trial. Eric Nelson, Chauvin's attorney, filed a motion claiming that Chauvin was deprived of his constitutional right to a fair trial. Yeah, bullshit. But Cahill said Nelson failed to prove any of the allegations. Thomas Lane, Jay Tiong, and Tu Chow, the three former Minneapolis police officers accused of aiding and abetting in Floyd's death, will face trial coming next March. Meanwhile, a federal grand jury indicted Chauvin, Lane, Tiong, and Chow for violating Floyd's civil rights, which could add to time to the sentences the former officers may face. But those charges accuse them of violating the federal law forbidding government officials from abusing their authority. But violating someone's civil rights is punishable by a range of imprisonment and up to a life term or the death penalty, depending on the circumstances and injuries resulting from the crime, according to the Department of Justice. But Chauvin also faces another charge, a federal indictment stemming from a competition with a 14-year-old back in 2017, so that could give him time added. So he's got 22 years for the George Floyd case, but then he's got maybe another time added on if they find him guilty on this case from 2017. Yep.